Welcome to the debate. Imagine, for just a moment, trying to navigate this massive commercial cargo ship through a narrow, super trafficked, treacherous strait,
Okay, sounds stressful.
right? But there is a huge catch. You are entirely forbidden from looking out the front window.
Wait, really?
Yeah, you are only allowed to look backward, over the stern, just, studying the wake trailing behind you.
That's a terrifying way to pilot a ship.
Exactly. You can't see the rocks ahead. You can't see the changing currents in real time. You can only meticulously measure the water you have already passed through.
And yet, that absurd scenario is exactly how global enterprise finance has operated for, well, the better part of a century. Just navigating by the wake, the sacred, immovable ritual of the monthly close.
Totally. But that era, the world of the rearview mirror CFO, is structurally and definitively over. Today, we are unpacking the frameworks outlining the CFO of 2030, which point to a fundamental transformation in global finance.
Right, we are witnessing the death of the monthly close and, the rise of the real-time CFO, driven by just the sheer unprecedented velocity of data.
Historically, the CFO evolved from a basic financial reporter into a financial guardian, right? After those regulatory overhauls of the early 2000s.
Yeah, and later, cloud ERPs turned them into strategic partners. But this third transformation is entirely different.
Exactly. It is being driven by artificial intelligence and continuous transaction controls. So my stance on this evolution is that real-time data and AI automation actually liberate the CFO.
Liberate them?
Yes, elevating them into highly strategic architects of enterprise intelligence. By automating the mundane, the modern financial leader is finally free to look out the front window.
Well, I look at the mechanics of this shift very differently. I argue that real-time compliance mandates and the required governance of these autonomous AI systems actually trap the CFO. They get stuck in a hyper-operational, high-stakes system management role where errors manifest and compound in literally milliseconds.
Okay, let's lay the foundation by looking at the raw material of finance, which is the transaction itself. We are seeing over 60 countries right now implementing real-time tax compliance mandates.
Right, the continuous transaction controls, or CTCs.
Exactly. We are talking about frameworks like Saudi Arabia's ZATCA, or Italy's SDI, or Poland's KSEF.
Oh, those are massive overhauls. Governments are demanding that invoices be validated in real time by a government server before they can even be exchanged between businesses.
Which totally alters the fundamental physics of commerce. An invoice is no longer just some PDF that you email to a vendor and, reconcile 30 days later.
No, it becomes a continuous data event. Every single invoice carries structured, machine-readable XML data that gets submitted to tax authorities in milliseconds.
There is literally no end of month in the eyes of the tax authority anymore.
Right.
And by embracing this shift and really mastering strategic intelligence extraction, the CFO gains a continuous, unbroken signal of financial truth. You get live visibility into global cash positions.
Which is unprecedented. Exactly. You see real-time supply chain costs across borders. The automation of the old data assembler role isn't just an efficiency play, it is a massive liberation.
See, the technology is certainly shifting to real-time validation. I agree there. But I see a profound loss of core financial discipline in this transition.
A loss? How so?
You are basically replacing a strategic financial thinker with the system's governor. Let's really unpack the reality of those continuous transaction controls you mentioned.
Go for it.
In a CTC-mandated country, a rejected invoice does not just create a minor reporting discrepancy. It's not something an accountant can just flag, investigate, and fix by the end of the month.
Right. It demands immediate systemic accuracy.
It demands that the CFO manage an impossibly fast, live signal of operational failures. Consider the mechanism here.
Okay. If an AI flags a tax mismatch on a shipment of industrial parts in Germany, that invoice is rejected by the government node instantly.
Yeah, and then?
The ERP system automatically freezes the payment. The vendor system automatically halts the physical shipment. The assembly line relying on those parts stops.
Wow.
And all of this happens in under 2 seconds. The traditional discipline of gathering, reconciling, and validating data provided a necessary buffer for human judgment. Now, A CFO is legally and operationally liable for a dashboard of millisecond-level system rejections.
I mean, if you're a CFO listening to this right now, you're probably thinking, I barely trust my ERP to close the books in 15 days.
Exactly.
How on earth can I trust an autonomous AI agent to do it in 15 milliseconds? It sounds like a total nightmare.
Because it is.
But wait, that fear assumes the CFO is manually intervening in every blocked transaction. And that fundamentally misunderstands the nature of modern system governance.
How so?
Think about a modern smart grid managing electricity for a massive city. The chief engineer of that grid doesn't manually route electricity to individual houses, right?
Sure, no, they don't.
They don't run outside to flip switches when a transformer spikes. They set the complex algorithms that balance the load automatically. AI-enabled financial agents are doing the heavy lifting of anomaly detection and exception handling.
Right.
The CFO is just setting the global parameters. They transcend the operational noise entirely.
Okay, but that assumes the algorithms perfectly understand the environment, which is constantly shifting.
Well, AI is highly adaptable.
But when a smart grid encounters a variable it wasn't programmed for, the city goes dark. And in finance, when the city goes dark, the CFO is the one answering to the board and the regulatory authorities.
That is a fair point, but
If an AI agent handling transaction validation misinterprets a new, highly nuanced tax parameter in Italy's SDI framework, it doesn't just make a localized math error. It autonomously blocks thousands of transactions across the entire European supply chain
right.
in a matter of minutes. The risk is now a live, highly reactive signal. This isn't autopilot, it's air traffic control during a hurricane.
But the response to that risk is systemic, not manual. When a transaction is blocked in Italy, the modern CFO isn't calling the Italian vendor to fix the invoice.
I would hope not.
Exactly. They are adjusting the systemic governance parameters of the AI. They are fixing the root logic, ensuring that the error never replicates across the millions of subsequent transactions.
Sure, theoretically.
That is a fundamentally higher order of operational management. You are fixing the system, not just treating the symptom.
Because the risk is so high, though, and that time buffer is completely gone, the underlying architecture becomes the CFO's single biggest liability.
Absolutely. Architecture is key.
Which means getting to that higher order of management requires the CFO to possess a level of technical expertise that completely distorts their traditional mandate. We are seeing organizations making massive existential bets right now.
Oh, definitely. Like migrating to S/4HANA?
Exactly. Restructuring the entire central nervous system of their multinational operations to handle complex e-invoicing solutions. This is basically forcing the CFO to become an IT architect.
Well, hold on. Designing data governance isn't the same as writing code. There is a very distinct difference between data architecture literacy and data engineering.
The line between the two is getting incredibly blurry in practice, though.
Is it?
Yes. If you are deciding where to embed the compliance logic in a global S/4HANA migration, like whether to use a centralized cloud module or localized edge computing for tax validation, you are doing engineering design.
I wouldn't call that engineering. It's strategic placement.
But if the traditional roles of gathering data and overseeing basic compliance are fully replaced by AI, what is actually left? The CFO is tasked with standardizing transactional data across 60 different global jurisdictions. Right.
They are making highly technical software deployment decisions. You are taking a financial strategist and forcing them to spend their time debating the structural merits of a canonical data layer. They essentially become a systems engineer in disguise.
Look, I see the risk of scope creep, I really do. But let's consider the mechanics of that relationship. Understanding how financial data is generated, structured, validated, and governed, that does not mean configuring the actual servers.
It demands a highly technical mindset, though.
Sure, it means understanding the supply chain of your own information. Think of a master chef at a Michelin-starred restaurant.
Okay, I love a good food analogy.
A master chef doesn't forge their own knives or weld their own ovens, but they absolutely must understand how the thermal dynamics of that oven and the carbon composition of the steel affect the final dish.
Right, okay. A CFO who delegates data architecture entirely to IT without a strategic view is essentially a chef letting the appliance repairman write the menu.
You know, I actually share your concern about delegating entirely to IT, When we look at the reality of these implementations, the results of doing so are almost always disastrous.
Oh, totally disastrous.
If you hand this transition to an IT department, their mandate is typically just to solve the immediate problem at the lowest possible cost.
Yep, exactly.
They will buy a cheap, localized point solution to handle e-invoicing in France. Next year, they will buy a completely different vendor software for real-time reporting in Poland. Then another for Saudi Arabia.
And then nothing talks to each other.
Exactly. Each system has its own distinct data model, its own proprietary AI, and its own completely separate update schedule.
And the result of that fragmented compliance patchwork is literally catastrophic for financial intelligence. The CFO might be legally compliant in each individual country, but they are entirely blind to the global picture.
100%.
The data flowing back to headquarters is inconsistent, incomparable, and completely siloed. You just can't run enterprise-level AI on fragmented data.
Which is why we definitely find common ground on the absolute necessity of a centralized data orchestration model.
Oh, good, we agree on something.
A single canonical data layer is non-negotiable if a company wants to survive this transition.
Preach.
If the CFO wants to see consolidated tax liabilities or enterprise-wide risk exposure in real time, they must force the entire organization to standardize transactional data across all jurisdictions before it ever hits the AI agents.
Enforcing that standardization is the ultimate act of financial leadership. That isn't data engineering. That is the CFO declaring, I refuse to be blinded by fragmented systems.
It's a bold stance to take, for sure.
Which brings us to the core paradox of this entire evolution. A common anxiety is that if autonomous AI handles compliance, reconciliation, and all the heavy lifting of data analysis, the CFO is left with nothing to do but panic over system alerts.
That is a very real anxiety.
But the reality is that greater automation amplifies strategic importance. With autonomous systems handling the mind-numbing manual reconciliation of the past, the constraint on a finance team is no longer data availability.
Interesting.
It isn't about how fast you can close the books anymore. The new constraint is the human capacity to ask the right questions of the data. What is happening right now across every transaction and every jurisdiction? And what does it tell us about our next decision?
And here is where I question the psychological reality of this model. Can human imagination truly flourish when it is burdened by the immediate, practical stress of governing autonomous financial agents?
Why couldn't it?
Because we are asking a human being to be a brilliant, forward-looking visionary while simultaneously holding the ultimate responsibility for a machine that is firing off live transactions in 60 different, highly punitive regulatory environments.
I mean, they have teams. It's not just one person.
But the mental bandwidth required to ensure your AI agents aren't hallucinating tax liabilities or incorrectly blocking vital supply chain payments is just immense.
Let's look at a concrete scenario to illustrate why that mental bandwidth is better spent on the system than the spreadsheet. Imagine a localized currency crash happening in Brazil.
Okay.
While simultaneously, logistics costs begin spiking in Vietnam due to a port strike. A traditional CFO, relying on the monthly close, sees this reality 30 days later.
Right. They get the report a month down the line.
Exactly. They get the consolidated report, realize they lost millions in margin, and have to explain to the board why they didn't react.
A tough conversation.
Very. Now, consider the 2030 CFO operating with a canonical data layer and AI anomaly detection. They see the margin eroding live on Tuesday morning.
Okay, sure.
Because the data is standardized and verified in real time, they can autonomously model the cost impact and shift supply chain purchasing from Vietnam to Mexico by Tuesday afternoon. The routine work of finding the numbers is gone. The strategic work of allocating capital based on those numbers is instantaneous.
See, that scenario assumes a state of perfect, frictionless data.
Well, no system is perfect.
Right. It assumes the AI didn't hallucinate the logistics spike in Vietnam because of a dirty data feed from a third-party vendor. What is happening right now is a beautiful theoretical question.
It is.
But in the trenches of enterprise finance, right now is inherently chaotic. Right now involves disputed invoices, incomplete vendor master data, and localized system outages.
Sure, but
The traditional monthly close, for all its structural flaws, forced a period of deliberate reflection. It forced human accountants to sit down, look at the anomalies, investigate the context, and finalize a verified truth.
By eliminating that period of reflection, you think we lose something?
Yes, we are prioritizing operational velocity over considered judgment. You are asking the CFO to make a massive supply chain shift to Mexico based on a live signal that might just be a temporary data glitch.
But we aren't eliminating reflection, we are just moving the reflection from the bottom of the pyramid to the top.
How so?
Instead of 100 accountants reflecting on why an invoice doesn't match a purchase order, which is a problem the autonomous system resolves by querying the vendor's database instantly,
Okay.
the CFO is free to reflect on enterprise-wide capital allocation. The accuracy of AI in matching and validating structured data far exceeds human manual entry. We have mathematically proven that.
I won't argue the math.
When you have a continuous, verified view of your organization's financial position, your risk exposure models become dynamic. Decisions made on real-time continuous data are structurally superior because they reflect reality as it is, not reality as it was a month ago.
I understand the appeal of the vision, I really do, but we must acknowledge the immense fragility we are introducing into the corporate structure.
Fragility.
Yes. When a company relies entirely on a centralized data orchestration model feeding real-time AI agents, a systemic failure isn't just a late report, it is a total blackout of enterprise intelligence.
That's a dramatic way to phrase it.
But it's true. The old rearview mirror might have been looking backward, but it was physical, it was distributed, and it rarely shattered completely.
Right.
This new, fully integrated real-time system is incredibly powerful, absolutely. But if the single, canonical data layer goes down, or if the AI governance parameters are poorly designed, the CFO is flying blind at 1,000 miles an hour.
Which simply underscores why the modern CFO must master data architecture literacy today. The stakes are monumental, but retreating to the safety of the monthly close is a luxury we no longer have.
That is undeniably true.
The governments of the world, through CTC mandates, have already decided the future of commerce. The transaction is a continuous data event now. We cannot go back to the paper era, and we simply cannot navigate modern supply chains by looking at the wake.
On that structural reality, there's just no room for debate. The transition is not some theoretical future state. It is happening right now across Europe, Latin America, and Asia. It is undeniable that the era of the monthly close as the defining rhythm of the finance function is completely over.
So, to synthesize the core tension we have explored today, the velocity of data has permanently altered the landscape of enterprise finance. However, whether this continuous real-time flow of financial data empowers the CFO to be a visionary strategist who dynamically allocates capital, or forces them into the high-stakes, reactive governance of autonomous systems,
Depends entirely on the architectural foundations they lay today.
yes, exactly.
And the most vital takeaway is understanding the danger of a fragmented compliance patchwork. Whether you view this new era as a profound liberation or a hyper-operational trap, delegating the architecture entirely to IT and ending up with localized, disconnected point solutions literally guarantees failure.
Absolutely.
A unified, canonical data layer is the absolute prerequisite for surviving the wave of real-time mandates.
The technology itself is no longer the primary constraint. The real-time visibility exists. The AI agents are capable of the heavy lifting. The true constraint is the human imagination to leverage it.
It requires a completely new cognitive framework for understanding risk, system design, and ultimate financial leadership.
It really does. If you had a continuous, real-time, completely verified view of your entire financial operation, how would your strategic decisions change tomorrow?
It's a huge question.
There is so much more to explore in this evolving landscape of enterprise finance, and we encourage everyone listening to interrogate how these architectural bets are being placed in their own organizations right now.
Couldn't agree more.
We will leave the discussion here, allowing you to decide what the true future of the CFO mandate looks like. But keep that massive commercial cargo ship in mind. The next time you find yourself meticulously measuring the wake trailing behind your organization, ask yourself, what will it take to finally look out the front window?